Okay, welcome back. We are exactly where we left off then, late September 1852, and I have spent a day considering our options and the next move. And let's have a quick look at the Western Front as it is. So, as the summer draws to a close, it's clear that on both the Western and Eastern Front, a significant amount of kind of fluidity has opened up. It looks like the Russians are trying to make the best of this situation. And on reflection, we have to be a little bit aggressive here. The reason being is because either in the last video or the one before that, I suggested that the fortress at Sofia is about as strong as the fortress at Plevna. That's not actually true. The fortress at Sofia, apart from the fact that it's only partially constructed, has 28,700 men. The fortress at Plevna had about 40,000 men plus guns. And if you look at the failed Russian attempts to take Plevna, most of those casualties came from, they were ranged casualties. So a lot of those casualties were caused by the guns at the citadel. This fortress is smaller, it's partially formed, and it doesn't have any guns, which means the Russians are going to be able to close on this fortress much more easily. I still think that they'd be hard-pressed to take it, but the worry is the Russians don't have access to supplies. I think they've probably drawn most of the supplies they can from Plevna now, and the only option they have really is to sustain an offensive by continuously taking our depots. And the only two depots that we have in the Balkans, other than Adrianopolis and Salonika and Sofia, and we don't want the Russians to kind of roll over depot after depot, taking our fortresses in the Balkans, and also, isolating much of the Balkans, crippling our supply and logistics system, and using the supplies we have in those depots to propel their own offensives. So, to that end, we're going to sort of make a bit of a move. Now, Omar Pasha is set to an offensive posture. I've removed the independent cavalry brigade. The independent cavalry brigade is going to hook left through Varna, move into Plevna. Omar Pasha has already made some headway towards Plevna because he was set to kind of move on Plevna in early September. His movement was disrupted by a Russian army corps that kind of fell back into Constanta, presumably looking to open up a corridor, presumably thinking that our plan was to march south. So he's only 3 days march to Plevna. So that's the plan. We're going to move. We're going to move into Plevna and try and force the Russians down, bottle them up towards Sofia. That moves them even further away from this corridor. There are no troops to the north just yet. The hope here is they're going to have nothing there soon. Omar is set to an all-out attack. His force has experienced some kind of disorganization and cohesion loss and some minor casualties, but I would say on par. He's, I can imagine that this is also going to be the case with the Russians. I think he's well placed. He's only 3 days away, and the battle is going to last maybe a day, 2 days, something like that, and he'll have the rest of the turn to recover and organize his force. That's the plan in the west. There's not much more we can do in the west. We're going to keep the main fleet sitting in the Bosporus, just to basically close this lane off to any kind of Russian shipping, especially since we have had reports that last turn that Russians were moving forces through there. Let's have a quick check on the raiding fleets in Smyrna. Yeah, I mean that's in good shape now. Fully supplied, reorganized. Time to earn your money, boys. We'll send that to the trade box. Okay, weather's going to deteriorate. It's probably longer odds that he's going to spot anything, but who knows? We may be surprised. Maybe he's just more effective in poor weather. That's the west anyway. Now the east. The Russians have thrown us a bit of a curveball here. Vorontsov, who's been absolutely rubbish since March, has done nothing. Besieged Kar fell back, at the moment where he was actually making some headway and had begun to breach the fortress. Is now sort of moving through Van into Bitlis and, moving into the kind of soft kind of underbelly of the front, really. You can see then that I've begun the fortification of Diyarbakir. This will buy us a little bit of time. The fortification has only just begun. We've released funds and manufactured goods for that, but I felt that it was important that we kind of stalled the Russians here for a period of time. Now, this Russian force, of course, and there's a cavalry division to the rear, so that cavalry division could be used to try and keep Van open, which gives them a kind of supply lane to the main force in Bitlis. This could get interesting. This could get very interesting indeed. I mean, the weather is going to change, but then in March, in March, Tiflis and Kars was covered in snow. The mountains were still very, very kind of cold, and Vorontsov, despite not being terribly aggressive, was relatively effective in moving to Kars quite quickly. and didn't seem to suffer any massive organisation loss or anything. So we have to kind of keep that in mind. We can't just rely on terrain. Terrain can slow the opponent down, can make movement more difficult. But mountains are not the same as a fortress. They will pass through mountains and this sort of thing. A Russian force under a commander we haven't seen yet. Then. Looks like a 2-star Lieutenant General Ivan Krasnov has landed in Trabzon, is besieging the city. He looks like he's got a cavalry division and a brigade. That's not enough to storm the fortress, I don't think. But what's the purpose of this move? Is Vorontsov going to move north to the fortress at Erzurum, try and link up with this small force at Trabzon? Could be an interesting play. I don't know. But I think this has to be dealt with anyway. We do have Hussein Avni in Batumi. We're going to set Hussein into an offensive posture, all-out attack. Hussein Avni is going to move in. It's going to take him 4 days, and we're going to deal with the situation very quickly. If this is just a cavalry division, our intelligence is correct. My thinking is that Hussein Avni, with an army corps plus, he's got an army corps plus his supply convoy, he's going to be fine. Abdi Pasha is moving north to Batumi. The plan here was obviously to achieve a bit of force concentration. I think we're still going to do that because the idea is we're going to see if we can use riverine points to move Rita Pasha's corps once it's finished sort of fabrication. We're going to still see if we can look at maritime options to move to Batumi. To that end, I'm also going to look at the possibility of constructing just something that might beef up 190 days, 8 manufactured goods, 4 conscripts. This is only 90 days. Turkish river transport. Now, I think we will be able to use this force along coastal areas. So the difference between river transport, confusingly, and riverine transport is where you have a force, like, for example, these Bashi Bazooks, they're heading south, where it's an accumulation of points that you have based on the size of your harbours. So you can see this is an anchorage combined with all of your ports, provide you with a kind of an allotment of riverine points. This reflects really, I suppose, the requisitioning of civilian vessels and so on and so forth to move small forces. The difference between that and actual transport fleets is these are dedicated military units that are built specifically for the purpose of moving forces. Now this transport squadron is like a large transport squadron. It's typically the kind of thing that would move entire divisions, or in some cases army corps. But we need to kind of buff this. We need to beef this up a little bit. This transport capacity is not quite enough to move Rita Pasha's force. And I'm thinking that long term anyway, we do want to have sufficient heavy lift capacity. I don't think riverine points is going to cut it for an entire army corps. We do want to be able to have the option to move forces from Sinop to Batumi on a regular basis, because Sinop is one of our main kind of cities in the metropole, if you like. It's going to be the place where we're going to be building army units from time to time. So it's going to exist as a kind of a constant place where we're going to fabricate, recruit, and develop army units. It's one of our big bases, if you like. It's got a depot and all this sort of thing. So yeah, the idea is we'll use this to kind of, because the march from Sinop to the eastern frontier is just too long in this kind of terrain. Forces take like a month or more. They're disorganized for an additional fortnight or more once they get there, so you have to really, really plan ahead. My thinking is keeping a kind of constant heavy lift capacity in Sinop means that we're always going to be in a position to fairly quickly redeploy forces to the eastern frontier. So to that end, let's get some smaller kind of craft. Sail or paddle. Paddle costs more. It obviously has a small steam engine. It's more manufactured goods, but it takes slightly less time. But the cost of river transports is almost nothing. We'll go with kind of sail river transports for now. It takes a little longer, but in fact, I should have just built them in Sinop. Never mind, too late. Okay, now 120 days is like an estimate. We'll be operational in approximately 79 days. The hope is it'll be a little bit quicker than that. We'll see. There's nothing else being constructed in Constantinople in the last analysis, so that'll go quite quickly. I mean, that's going to be like November, I think, by the time that's operational. Probably not soon enough to be able to kind of help Rita Pasha out. But then if we actually factor in the amount of time it's going to take Rita Pasha to march to the east, it may even be worth waiting for those those kind of smaller support craft to kind of finish sort of being built, sent to Sinop, and then lift his force to Batumi. It may actually still be quicker, even with the added time of having to construct those forces. We'll kind of revisit that. We'll fall off that bridge when we come to it. But okay, so Hussein Avni's moving into Trabzon. Avni's moving north into Batumi, and we'll look to get some kind of concentration going on here at some point once Rita Pasha's in the game. The hope is that kind of pulling back from Kars and sort of pulling our main force out of the U will encourage Vorontsov to kind of go north. As I say, we're going to move these Bashi bazooks down. These are just irregular paramilitaries, conduct some kind of guerrilla activity in Van, maybe close off his supplies. I think anything we do here is going to be kind of fairly temporary because there's a cavalry division sort of sitting in Aravan, which is probably going to kind of look to keep a corridor open. So we've got a relief force moving from Sana then to Hodeida, just looking to lift the siege on the colonial fort. They'll be there in 13 days, so we're going to be looking at action there, some kind of contact there, probably towards the end of the turn, but before October, before October begins, we'll probably see a small kind of colonial engagement there, as is also the case of the interior. This infantry force is 10 days away now. We're set to a kind of conservative attack. We don't want this force getting mauled or having sort of experiencing heavy casualties. This is sort of a spoiling raid, really, just to whittle their force down. The cavalry force is being kind of reconstructed, and that it takes less time to move. But once the kind of small cavalry brigade has kind of recovered, it'll kind of be their turn next. And the idea is if we can keep a cycle, a constant sort of pressure on this interior, eventually these Senussi raiders will be forced back, possibly into Egypt, or destroyed entirely. But we'll keep an eye on that situation. We don't want that spiraling out of control or getting too nasty. And we've obviously have very limited forces here at the moment. Now, is that it? I think it is. In terms of economic report, shifting the same kind of number of goods on the domestic market, 66 units of goods for 253. Imports lifting this turn then 148, 27 merchandises. That's going to be mostly manufactured goods and supply. I'm going to check that real quick, see what the availability of manufactured goods is. Yeah, North Germany, Chesapeake, and Scandinavia. We'll have a quick look over there, and we'll sort of press for a premium. We've got a nice amount of stockpile of private capital. We don't mind kind of putting a bit of pressure on private capital at this stage. We're not looking to build anything right away. So we've got premium set for Scandinavia, premium set for North Germany, and I think we should have premium set for Chesapeake. So offering the premium is just a way of really increasing our likelihood of actually securing, because at the moment it's a bit of a bottleneck resource. Really it's a strategic resource, manufactured goods, still very rare in the 1850s, and is a requirement for industrialization. And we don't build very many manufactured goods ourselves. We don't make very many manufactured goods. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's it. That's economic administration really organised. We've got everything set for our exports, holding back what we need to hold back for domestic consumption. Omar is set to an all-out attack. The cavalry division is set to a conservative attack as it's a smaller force and going out on a limb. Hussein Avni is set to an all-out attack. We want to sort of go for maximum casualties here, and I think he's in a fairly strong position. There's a possibility this force sitting up in Poti might follow him as he moves into Trabzon. This force might be looking to kind of press. This has got 2 units of some description. I can't imagine their army corps sizes. I think they're going to be like brigades, but we don't know that. Don't know the name of the commander yet either. But yeah, the Russians are sort of they're certainly piling the pressure on the east a little bit. I think that's it for the time being. Yeah, that's it for the time being. That's our moves made. Let's pass turn and roll the dice. One thing I think we need to consider a little bit is that it's natural in the midst of a war, especially with a major power, to become really tunnel visioned on that power alone. And as we start kind of moving into the mid-1850s, there's some other considerations. So, of course, we need to think about Austria a little bit, and maybe even, I think, in 53, start making some moves to sort of secure our position a little bit in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I think maybe building a fortress in Sarajevo, a depot there, and just firming up our position a little bit. Because at the moment we couldn't even supply an army. I mean, that's how bad our kind of military infrastructure is. We would not even be able to supply an army in Bosnia-Herzegovina, whereas Austria could, and yet Bosnia-Herzegovina is nominally our territory. And also give some thoughts, some likely events in the late 1850s. I mean, the Risorgimento, the Italian unification, whether that's going to come off, and what our position might be. And my thinking is that I suppose Italian unification would mean what? A weaker Austria in a relative sort of way. But also the emergence of, a significant maritime power in the Mediterranean. A competitor, a united Italy, which would look covetously at Libya, would establish and is establishing itself, even in the kind of hybrid form of sort of, Piedmont, Sardinia, is establishing itself in the Horn of Africa. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we do actually have colonial fortresses in Eritrea and a bit of a presence in Djibouti. Now, this is a kind of, I guess, a colonial project that the Ottomans had that sort of withered a little bit as it kind of went into decline. And this control is a bit of a legacy of that, really. But the Horn of Africa, with Italy being the only major competitor, may be an area for expansion much later on, decades from now. I think in the short term, in the next decade or so, we need to look at securing the Arabian Peninsula, exploring and prospecting the interior, and sort of ensuring the British don't establish them in enclaves, really, on the exterior part of the peninsula, the British or the French or anyone else, frankly. So I think that that has to be the kind of priority, and we can't spread our colonial resources too thin. We still have a relatively small economy with a very limited amount of tax revenue. So sort of, funneling money into kind of bribing tribal leaders and elders and stuff in Abyssinia probably isn't on the cards for the time being. It would just be a waste of money. We wouldn't really be able to exploit any kind of gain that we made there at this stage. But it is something to consider. I think probably if Italy isn't united, Austria would be slightly stronger, but not much more stronger. And the thing is also, if Italy isn't united during the Risorgimento, that doesn't mean that the pressure to unite Italy from Piedmont, Sardinia is removed. It may be that they would still pressure for it, and this would serve as a distraction. If Italy is united and Italy becomes a significant power in some way, they're going to function as a kind of distraction a little bit. Or actually, they might function as less of a distraction to the Austrians. The Austrians may very well come to terms with what it's lost in Italy. If Germany is united, the same is the case there. And with Russia to the east, the Austrians can't really make any play to the east. So my concern is that if Italy is united, kind of by default, really, we're left as the only power that the Austrians might take an interest in. They might then begin to consider that, as they did in real life, that Bosnia-Herzegovina, the absorption of that kind of enclave, really, can serve to kind of mitigate and offset some of their losses in northern Italy and their status loss, really, in Germany with Italian unification. Making a bit of a play during the Risorgimento, even an aggressive play, obviously subject to factors, subject to the state of our economy at that time and our military and so on and so forth. It might be an interesting play, but then it might not be, because of course it may be actually beneficial for us, for the Austrians, to win in the Risorgimento, to actually defeat Italy. Food for thought. We might even be able to sit back Austria in Italy and try and prevent the Italian unification. That would be a little bit of a far-out move, but it's something to consider. And with all the kind of focus on building our army up, it's really easy to forget the navy. And for good reason, the Ottoman navy was never really in bad shape. Even with a relative decline of the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman navy generally built fairly good modern ships. It's a relatively decent size, and you kind of notice that in January 1850. I mean, at the beginning of the game. The Ottoman navy is not that bad. And I think the reason being is because the Janissaries, of course, sort of served as a fetter really on any kind of development in the army. So the army was sort of, in this sort of cryostasis. It couldn't develop new techniques or anything like this because anyone that ever attempted to implement reforms in the army was fairly quickly bumped off. And I suppose also the Ottomans had a tendency to kind of encourage ineffective monarchs that were disinterested. They might kill the brothers who took the idea of governance too seriously, and it might be beneficial, over a period of centuries, really. Oh my God, here we go. The Turkish defeat. Damn, that was at Sofia. They took Sofia. That's exactly what I feared. And that looks like the loss of all of those forces as well. Yeah, so the semi-constructed pre-industrial fort. They've got 100,000 men. Oh my God, that's difficult. So they now have access to that depot, which is somewhat larger than Plevla as well. Damn. Okay. Yeah, so they're now kind of offsetting their supply issue by doing exactly what I was concerned about. Yeah, okay. Well, let's see what happens. What day are we on? Day 3. Oh, okay, I guess that was just the remains then of, there were 600 men left. Damn. Okay. This is the Battle of Plevla. Okay, I mean that's a pretty convincing victory. Happy with that. We've destroyed 7, 8, 9, 10 regiments. We suffered 16, 17,000 casualties. We took 8,600 prisoners, and they lost 31,000 with 1,320 guns. Yeah, I mean that's a convincing victory for sure. And that's on day 5. Okay. Interesting. British defeat. Okay. Nice one, Brits. Thanks for coming. Okay, the reason that we're aware of that is because our cavalry division was a part of that move in Varna. That's a shame. It looks like they have an army corps in Varna, or a force in Varna, and obviously with Omar moving into Plevna, that kind of opens them up to move north now and open up a kind of an avenue. Okay, so it looks like the Russians just broke off Ivan Krasnov. Okay, quite poor stats. That's comforting. He's not a terribly dynamic commander, so okay, good stuff. And that's his cavalry division, and then yeah, a kind of line brigade. Okay, good job, Hussein Avni. I mean, yeah, Sofia is obviously a disappointment, but okay, so that force is moving into the interior. Yeah, it's getting complex. It's getting it's getting messy, isn't it? I can't remember what I was rambling on about now, but yeah, interesting round. Oh, here we go. Oh my God, look at that! In October, it looks like our raiding force has found something and is engaging it. Okay, Turkish defeat. 400 men lost, inflicted 100 casualties. That's the infantry force that was presumably quite exhausted by the time it reached the interior. But okay, that's Amal done. I think that's Hodida next. Well, we'll wait to the kind of days of fish processing and yeah, look in a bit more detail. Oh, you gotta be kidding me! That's a shame. Nothing too serious, nothing too much to worry about there though. Actually, we destroyed an entire regiment as well. Casualties are about kind of on parity. Looks like rainfall kind of disrupted that somewhat as well. So yeah, whatever reason that force had to break off. Perhaps its organisation was very poor or whatever. Okay, excellent. More raiding in the trade box. That's really good. So after, however many months, nearly 6 months of not seeing any Russian ships, We sent them back in late September, and it looks like it engages in 2 rounds of raiding. So it must have spotted a convoy, I guess, thought it. Well, they didn't really have convoys during this time, I suppose, so perhaps not a convoy. Although I suppose in some cases you might have had ships sailing in small clusters. I'm not sure if that would count as a convoy or not. Things are getting interesting in the Balkans, aren't they? What are the Russians going to do now? And it looks like that cavalry division was kind of mauled along with the British force on the coast in, not Rumelia, Varna. So that may have fallen back north, perhaps towards Constanta. We'll have a look. Now, Omar Pasha did get a fairly decent rest there. He engaged on day 5. I think it was 3 rounds of combat that lasted for 3 hours. But yeah, let's have a look. Okay. Excellent. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, we lose. Damn. Yeah, of course, we're going to lose. Sofia is a major strategic objective, so we're going to lose morale points for that. We gain 1 morale point for the victory at Plevna, but lose 3 for the loss of Sofia. I mean, it's a temporary loss, but it's Ah, damn. That colonial fort surrendered as well, for Christ's sake. That's frustrating. Their organisation is completely zeroed out. They need to fall back. 40 days, for Christ's sakes. That kind of dooms Sana as well. The anchorage at Hodeida was the basis for supplying the colonial fort and our entire presence, really. In fact, it might even be kind of in select riverine movement points. It may be the case that we're going to have to abandon our position. I mean, if I move this cavalry force, which is so badly disorganized, well, it's a combination of marines and cavalry into Sana, it's going to take 42 days because of a combination, I guess, of poor weather now, which is turning. It's early October. We need to revisit this, but it may be the case that we're going to have to abandon our position in Aden, which was always something that we might have had to have done until the conclusion of war with Russia. But that's a bit of a surprise and worrying turn. So this Russian cavalry division has moved into the interior. This is kind of like, deep penetrating raiding, I suppose. Irritating. Hussein Avenue's not activated. Can't do much about it. There's a pontooning brigade that's managed to work its way into Kars. Yeah, Russians are sitting tight there. Got the Bashi bazooks to the rear, hopefully beginning to develop some military control in Van. Yeah, disappointment with Sofia. The odd thing is, it's something that one of the reasons I took a day out to think about it a little bit was precisely because I thought my appraisal of the fortress at Sofia may have been wrong, and that appraisal somewhat influenced, obviously, some previous movements. But yeah, damn, didn't foresee that. Well, or rather, I did, but at rather a late moment. One irritating thing about the British capturing Varna for us is that it means that for a period of time they have control over these fruits, the fruit plantation. It's only a small thing, but what I'm worried about is if the Russians move south, one economic area that I want to protect is the kind of tobacco belt, if you like, which ranges from Constantinople through Adrianople, Thrace, Thracia, and into Salonika. I don't want the British liberating territories for us that are economically lucrative. This is temporary. I can't remember how long it lasts. I think after the conclusion of the war, if the British control any RGOs, they end up controlling them for 6 months or something like that. You know, there's a kind of gradual process where these things are handed back to you. And it's irritating because during that time, obviously, you lose access to that commodity in some way. Or rather, it's produced, but it's produced by the British, which is annoying. That said, the Russians may recapture this. I mean, their force actually defeated the British. Anyway. So this cavalry division, for example, may recapture this area, and then this provides us with an opportunity of recapturing it back. So there's a Russian cavalry division that I guess is going to move north towards Constanta. To the south, Rumelia has 100% control. I don't think that we're strong enough to move on the Russian force at Sofia just yet. We could do it, 8 days. That cavalry division has been more, isn't it? We'll move this cavalry division down, I think, anyway, towards Adrianople. We'll avoid combat. Yeah, a lot to think about here. A lot to think about. Let's read through the reports in a bit more detail. Yeah, so the loss of Sofia has not gone down well at all. So we've lost 3 national morale points on the basis, I think, of the loss of Sofia, +1 from really the kind of fiasco in Yemen, the loss of the Hodeida anchorage and colonial fort, which happened rather suddenly. We gain 1 from battle, we gain 1 from national resilience, will to fight, and we lose 1 from war weariness. But I think we can certainly chalk that up as a bad, as not a good turn. Russians are sitting at 93, slightly below us. Okay, well, we can take some comfort in that, but yeah, I mean, to think that only a month ago we were kind of harbouring wet dreams about destroying the entire Russian army in Plevla, and now they've just captured very quickly one of our largest depots and forts in the Balkans. They are still kind of like sort of sandwiched in kind of thing, and we still have a force screening them from their kind of a consistent sustained source supplies at Odessa. But yeah, where do they go from here? I suppose south towards Salonika. Okay, we've got some developments. So Omar Pasha's congratulated new seniority. Yeah, I mean that was it in the last analysis. Even though it shows that it's not sufficient just to win battles to win wars. That was a pretty good battle. I mean, it's a really sizable battle that Omar Pasha won. It's very easy to take these kind of things for granted, but I mean he was our only source of good news really. As we enter the autumn, and that was a convincing victory against a force larger than his own. 100,000 men, nearly 50,000 horse, 800 guns. Bloody hell's bells! I didn't realise they had that many guns. So a force larger, outgunned by them rather, and I mean he does the job, and he does it convincingly. So you can't argue with Omar Pasha and what he's kind of managed to achieve. And so Mustafa Abdul Karim Nadir also did well in that action, and Abdul Karim Nadir is now promotable. Interesting. And he controls the Imperial Guard. And he's pretty good. Tactician of Elan, a fast mover, scorched earth. Very similar actually to Hussein Avni. Strategic rating of 4. A decent enough turn economically by the looks of it anyway. Okay. we'll leave it there. I think an interesting turn. You know, some bitterness, a bittersweet turn for sure. You know, definitely. I think we could say that was a bad turn. We've lost, 4 national morale points. So yeah, whatever is happening, kind of, on the surface of it, as far as anyone that's reading a newspaper in Constantinople is concerned, Sofia's just fallen. The Russians are in Sivas in the east. Which is like halfway. I mean, it's more than halfway to Ankara, and the colonial fort at Hodeida just fell, which is very bad news. So, I'm sort of looking to see if I can see any information on our raiding fleet. It appeared that they were engaging in some kind of raiding actions. There we go. While patrolling, inflicting 11 hits, taking 5 in return. That's good. So it looks like the Russians have some kind of escorts there as well. Yeah, but our ships took a bit of damage, and I think we're going to get these guys back. But that's a good round of raiding. But yeah, it looks like the Russians actually have beefed up their presence a little bit. This might be a good prospect now, even to move the main fleet into the kind of trade box. But we'll pull back the raiding fleet. It inflicted more damage than it took. Take that. But it sustained some damage. Okay, we'll leave it there. Early October, 1852. Yeah, bittersweet turn. Probably not the way I would have wanted it to have gone in Sofia, and perhaps, I think it's a strategic mistake. I realised too late in the day that Sofia was a bit more vulnerable than I had, really appreciated. It was much more vulnerable than Plevna. It was, it was a fortress that was being partially constructed, and perhaps being a bit more aggressive earlier on could have stopped that happening. But not the result that I foresaw happening. I think the next turn we'll revisit. I'll kind of leave the game as where we are in early October. So the next turn we'll do something similar. I'll begin in early October. We'll make our plays. We'll make some plans, and I can kind of drill into these reports and get a bit of a clearer idea of what's going to happen over the last the last 2 weeks, and base our actions on that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.